in terms of processes, there's a lot of people you hear say, well, we'll outsource the processing to a third party so that we become compliant. But how do you analyse those third-party vendors and actually understand if they are compliant themselves or not? Because I believe as a controller, you are responsible for appointing compliant processes.
Yeah, I mean, if I might start, I mean, I think one of the challenges you face if you appoint a processor is that if you're not compliant in the first place, appointing a processor isn't going to help you be compliant. It may be that the services that they are providing will help you be compliant in due course, but actually you've still got to focus on your front-end compliance. The whole principle about the controller processor is that the prime compliance obligation is on the controller. The processor is a mechanism to allow someone to process on your behalf, but you've got prime responsibility. And if you haven't collected the data properly to allow your processing, it won't become lawful simply because you pass it to a processor.
I don't think there's much you can add to that, really. But I think one of the things you need to be doing is identifying who your processors are. So that's basically who you are giving your information to, who's holding your information. Obviously, if you ask them what they're doing about the GDPR and they've never heard about it, you need to be thinking about who's actually processing your data for you. Because I know there are, well, we've certainly been quite surprised at some quite large companies who don't seem to be doing anything. So you may find you might have to change some of your processor, so that might be your cloud service providers, your database providers, obviously not FileFinder, where your HR systems, etc., particularly if some of those software providers are not within Europe. A lot of them are not thinking about this if they're based outside Europe. And there's also issues about passing data outside the European Union as well, which you can cover, but you need to be aware of that.
And indeed, that can be one of the hidden burdens, I suppose, of the GDPR. I'll give an example, actually, from our own situation. We use, as I'm sure many of you do, in the UK, we have childcare vouchers as a service that we can offer our staff. Our childcare service provider hadn't heard of GDPR. Now, we could, they're a major organisation, we could go through the process of finding someone new and going through that tendering process, but that's yet another burden we as a business now have on top of all the other regulatory compliance issues we have to do. So for those of you that haven't yet started your GDPR process and think you have relatively good infrastructure in place already, be aware of the hidden sort of costs and burdens on your time, because there'll be a lot of things that you aren't aware of just now. So start as early as you can and work around those problems.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth bearing in mind as well. So I guess being a lawyer, I do tend to look at pieces of legislation, but the GDPR does state if you appoint a processor, it says the controller shall only use processors providing sufficient guarantees to implement appropriate technical and organisational measures, etc., in order to ensure compliance. So you've really got due diligence. You can't just appoint anybody. You've got to be comfortable the person you're appointing can comply, and you should be looking for assurances from them about their compliance.
Yeah, lady at the front.
Alex, sorry.
I was just going to add one quick. No, it's fine. I was just going to add that it flows in both directions too. As a supplier to our clients, they're going to be coming to us to prove that we are in that chain of custody. We are compliant so that they can prove their compliance. So that's another aspect that we're looking at.
And we've already seen that happening with a number of our clients. Sometimes the first time they come to us is because they've had a document from their client to say, can you give a statement about what you're doing about the GDPR? And then they're thinking, right, we need to get on it. So I think that's going to start driving things a lot more.